First of all, thank you for joining us. Really do appreciate your coming in today to spend time with us. For those that don't know me, my name is Stephen Knight. I'm the founder and the CEO of Pimento, and we're an agency network that works in the independent sector, much like yourselves. And we position ourselves as an indispensable partner for brands and businesses looking to find the right agencies. And we provide that service for free. We will be recording today's session, so do smile throughout and turn your cameras on, and also remember to use the chat box. We want to make the session as interactive as possible. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see there's a little chat box there. Please, at any point in time, do post any questions there. We will come to you. And equally to, or just raise your hand, which you can do also using the bottom bar there. Today is a real deep dive into the world of education, as we call it, back to school. Many, obviously, schools, universities, and of course, nursery schools have already returned. Some are still to return. But actually, education, I guess, is one of those things that we could argue that it's an area where brand GB has led the world for many years. It's also one of the most competitive, fast evolving sectors when it comes to marketing. Now, with shifting student expectations and parents' expectations also developing, new digital platforms, tighter budgets, and increasing demand for measurable impacts, standing out in a very crowded marketplace has never been more difficult. Our panel today brings along a mix of senior marketing leaders from within the educational institutions, as well as agency experts who specialise in supporting schools, colleges, universities, and nurseries. Samantha Chapman is the Director of Marketing and Communication at Regent's University in London. Samantha leads the university's multidisciplinary marketing and communication strategy to bring Regent's unique value proposition to life. She has over 18 years' experience in the luxury sector, and Samantha has held roles at Stephen Webster, Michael Kors, and Longines. She's had successful ownership brand collaborations with notable figures such as American rock star Machine Gun Kelly, and implemented high-profile sponsorships, including a partnership with Ascot Racecourse. George Hughes comes from the world of marketing agencies. He is the founder of Small Films. They're a specialist content agency for the education sector, and he has over 20 years' experience, including 14 years directing primetime television programmes for BBC, Channel 4, Discovery, and National Geographic. He has since led projects for leading schools and universities such as Eton College, Regent's University, and his team brings deep sector expertise and have collectively worked with over 100 different educational institutions. Meanwhile, Kirsty Willis is the Managing Director of Manor Farm Nursery. She acquired the nursery back in 2016, since which time she has doubled attendance, expanded into out-of-school care and summer holidays, and built a leading preschool brand in the South Cotswolds. She combines her corporate acumen with a deep sector knowledge, and she focuses on brand strength, reputation, and community, driving sustainable growth in the early years education. Lisa Sims is the Group Head of Marketing at Mill Hill Education Group. She is the marketing leader. She has over a decade of experience of driving growth, brand visibility, and engagement across both retail and education. At Mill Hill Education Group, she shapes the brand identity and communications for multiple schools, leading strategic marketing to attract and inspire students, parents, and staff. Her previous roles include time spent at Liberty, M&S, Tesco's, particularly on the digital marketing side and multi-channel side, and she's underpinned by MSc in strategic marketing, so she knows her stuff. Rachel Ditchfield is Head of Education Research at Savanta. So Rachel has over 25 years experience in educational research, working with schools, universities, and skill providers. At Savanta, she helps institutions respond to shifts in student expectations, well-being, diversity, and employability. Future focus insights give educational marketeers the data and foresight they need to make confident, evidence-based decisions. So we have a researcher, and we have some insights to share with you. We have an agency leader, and we have three leading professionals covering the spectrum from 3 months up to 22 years old. So we're covering the whole market today. We're going to start with a few slides that Rachel's prepared, which will share some context right up to the minute information as to what's happening in the sector and how it's adapting to change. And then we'll come back and then form the group and dive into some hopefully interesting questions. Okay, so here we go. Rachel, over to you.
Great. Has that all come through?
It's all there,
Cool.
looking
Brilliant.
wonderful.
Okay, brilliant. So I'm just going to give you kind of a whistle stop tour. As Stephen said, we do lots and lots. My whole day is spent working with education institutions, trying to basically answer questions. So this is basically just kind of a summary of what we've kind of learned and kind of the key themes that are coming through on recent projects. So I think kind of one of the key things that are coming through most recently is the fact that the education is obviously seeing greater competition. Obviously, as you know, parents and potential students are kind of considering wider options, are seeing it more as a business transaction and wanting kind of very much return on their investment. Academic achievement is obviously still relatively important, but I think it's becoming part of a broader set of priorities. So they're looking for institutions to offer a distinct identity, treat individuals more than just numbers, foster a supportive environment, and very much kind of give them a reason to kind of choose them over any other institution. And I think it's also about kind of confidence in belonging and kind of giving them those future opportunities are now central. They're very much kind of baking and kind of identifying kind of different ways in terms of how they can kind of set the experience apart. So we've done few recent studies with independent schools, but I think what's kind of coming out quite poignantly is the fact that parents want schools to build skills for life, not just offer qualifications. And in this chart here, you can see, based on looking at both UK and international parents, that actually the top three elements they're looking at is, they want their child to, learn how to be independent, realize their full potential, and develop a set of values. That's before you kind of get onto achieving qualifications. So there are those values that kind of coming out. And there's a quote below in terms of actually a parent wanting those fundamental life skills, the ability to interact and talk and be able to kind of, foster a broader set of skills outside of just being able to sit exams. We also asked at the same time in terms of whether they felt that their current education was meeting their expectation. And I think this was quite an interesting one, that only 32% of parents feel that their child's current education is meeting their expectations. And a lot of it is around kind of those broader skills that they don't feel is kind of on the current curriculum. So, kind of those wider skills, preparing them for workplaces, preparing them to be able to kind of interact with people out in the outside world, as it were. So that's kind of a little bit of whistle stop on the independent. Kind of moving on now to the university side, and I just thought this quote was quite relevant to what we're talking about today in terms of the fact that this student chose the university because it had an emphasis on the employability and the value of connections within the industry. And this is what we're kind of seeing a lot in terms of students wanting to kind of understand, whether their value for money they're spending on their tuition fees is going to actually give them or give them a strong chance of getting a job at the end of it. So obviously this was all about employability, but also that practical experience in a nurturing atmosphere. They felt they could very much see a sense of belonging and the ability to kind of succeed when they were there. These next few charts are kind of very much taken from our HE Success Suite. We monitor first year students at university to kind of understand kind of different aspects of why they were choosing. And what comes out here is the fact that course and employability, obviously still over the last few years, have continued to be the top factor in terms of those university decision factors. But as you can see, the fourth one down is actually costs are becoming increasingly important, particularly since the pandemic, and obviously with the cost of living crisis, people are actually looking for, as I said before, that kind of more, they're willing to spend the money, but they want to be able to get more value for the money that they're seeing. And this is kind of demonstrates over a longer period. So during the pandemic, we obviously kind of saw it kind of drop a little bit, but since then, since 2021, it has been increasingly part of the main factors that they're looking for in terms of the decision-making factor. What I've done here is very much trying to summarize in terms of kind of what fits under that broader benefits in terms of people seeing. And I won't kind of go into the details, but you can kind of see it very much sits in terms of that high quality of teaching. They don't just want to know that, the academic or the teacher has, lots of years behind, but they want to know that the classes are going to be engaging, well structured. They want to have that regular tutor and contact time and the ability to be able to contact them if they need additional help. Said before, strong career and employability outcomes, that's kind of very much sitting at the forefront. But that sits alongside well-being and mental health. They want to go to an environment where they feel that they're supported, they've got a positive environment regardless of kind of their background. Alongside that, modern facilities and technology, they want to know that they've kind of got up-to-date classrooms, they've got learning resources, they've got those digital tools that can very much kind of help them, but also give them the skills that they could then move into a workplace as well. Flexible learning options, particularly kind of in the university, they want to be able to make sure that if they need to, they've got the option to be able to study remotely, fit around kind of part-time jobs, be able to kind of engage. So that's very much a balance, which is obviously kind of hard for universities to always offer. But also transparency, it's all kind of making sure right from the start that they understand what the opportunity is, what's included, and kind of where they can kind of rely on for the extra information if they need it. All of that in there, we also ran a study earlier this year where we found that currently just over half of students agree that their university provides that value for money that they're seeking. 81% of people say it's really important, but 56% agree that they feel it's providing value for money currently, and only 17% strongly agree with that. So quite a bit to do. And I think all of that taken on board, that people are actually looking at alternative qualifications, so such as degree level apprenticeships to kind of obviously give them that linkage with the workplace, but also non-degree online learning. So institutions are now starting to offer like bite-sized learning, or non-degree options will give them or fill in those skills gaps that they need to get onto the ladder of the job that they're looking to do. And universities are already starting to kind of give that in terms of an option. I've also looked in terms of just the last couple of slides in terms of how we can kind of engage with parents and potential students. And I think this will be no surprise to you, but in terms of kind of those from an independent school perspective, the top sources of information both UK and international parents are using. We've got school websites within there, we've got word of mouth, but actually social media is kind of coming up as being quite key within this. And I've just put stats down on the right-hand side to say that obviously whilst TikTok is relatively low in terms of actually looking for specific information at independent schools, it still sits for 33%, but actually 89% of parents are regularly using it. So it is a platform that they're engaging with quite often. And I think from a university perspective, so this is pre-applicants, and you can see on the right-hand side how things have shifted over time. Websites, UCAS websites are still high, but I've highlighted on there as well the fact that university TikTok, as you can see, is rapidly kind of increasing in terms of popularity as an element or an area that they'll use to get information. But I think also that university posts and emails I find really interesting, because I feel like it again goes back to that personal touch, wanting to actually engage with universities. But I think it's a case of they don't just want their standard cover-all email. They want something that's very much personalised, to know that the university is interested in them and not just trying to attract them as a number, like I said earlier on. And I think also when we look at it in terms of those applicants, the usage of TikTok, Facebook, is particularly growing, but the detriment of Facebook and X is definitely in decline. So you can see on the right-hand side the difference from ranking of 2015 down to 2024, and also on the left, kind of how those figures are changing over time. So that is just, as I say, whistle-stop tour in terms of some information that could hopefully feed the conversation from now. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you very much indeed, Rachel. That's really interesting stuff. We can share that with everybody after today's call, if that's okay. And if you've got any follow-up questions for Rachel, obviously they have a host of different services that they run on a continuous basis, as well as bespoke stuff. And you can contact her. We'll put her details into today's email that will follow afterwards. Right, I'm just going to add everybody to Spotlight. So just bear with me a second. Oh, it's been done for me, even better. One more to go. George, we have a quorum. Right. Okay. Well, let's get started. Obviously, we're covering a huge range of different ages, and there's lots of different activities at the moment that are impacting on education, not least of which some of the government actions in the last 12 months with VAT, and also obviously restrictions on students in terms of international students. And then positively, perhaps the introduction of up to 33 hours a week for preschoolers. So I'm going to start, if I may, with Lisa, talking about the VAT and the removal of the business rate. Can we just understand how it's really affecting schools in general? Obviously, specifically, you can talk about the group, but in schools in general, I'll also be interested. And how is marketing having to adapt to both reassure parents about the value proposition as well as protecting, obviously, brand reputation? A lot of different questions in there.
Yes, lots of questions. Good morning, everyone. So from our perspective, it's obviously a really challenging time for the sector. Parents are really questioning the value of independence education. From our perspective, we back 2 years ago, we launched Mill Hill Education Group, where we were a cluster of sort of 4 schools and rapidly grown over that. We've now got 12 schools in the UK, and the first overseas school opened in Thailand in September. So we've got the sort of we're part of a collective, so we've got that element of security that parents really want. I think one of the key elements we need to be is agile, and we're quite innovative in our approach. So the proposition has significantly changed across all our schools. So we've got some schools who are international school in Mill Hill. We've extended to sixth form. We've moved some of our schools, which is as long as it's right for the market, to co-ed from boys' schools. We've introduced to schools within schools. So down in our school in Cobham Hall, we now have a SEND provision. So it's called Bly House, and it's a dedicated SEND provision. So giving expertise in that area. We launched obviously our overseas market, and then we've also innovated in a way where we've got a senior school group pathway, which allows our prep schools. Families at our prep school a dedicated feeder into one of our senior schools without the sort of the stress of 11 plus or 13 plus examinations. So as long as the head has given sort of the green light to the pupil for each of the schools, they get that sort of dedicated pathway through, which really helps parents from the knowledge that and the safety that they'll be educated throughout without having that 11 plus challenge. In addition to that, as we've got group and collective in numbers, we launched our first prep inset this September, which allowed all our prep schools to come together. It was a mini conference as such, where schools can share ideas, best practices, and then collaborate with ideas. So it's just allowing staff across all the groups to come together to share best practices, which is another strength of all of us being together in the group. That's sort of a bit of a whistle-stop tour of what we've done for changing our proposition.
Okay. And in terms of immediate impact, in terms of the number of students applying to come to the school, parents applying for their kids to come to school, have you seen any kind of drop off at all, or is it mixed?
So, totally mixed. Some of our schools are actually up on previous, so and then some of the schools there has been declined. So, but we're actually not in a bad position compared to a lot of schools. Sadly, obviously, seeing a lot of schools closing. So, I think that reputation that we hold, but in addition to that, the fact that the security for the parents, and also we can still recruit really good talent because people know there is security in numbers.
Yeah, no, that does make sense. And I guess also it's going to take a wee while to kind of get through the system, isn't it? Because if you've committed to a private school education, independent school education, you might be halfway through that process in a 5 year period. You're going to do whatever you can, I guess, as a parent to try and keep the child there.
Yeah, I don't think we've seen the true impact of it yet. Obviously, if you're already bought into the independent sector, you truly believe in it. So I think parents will do all they can to keep their child in there. I think it's then the lower years that we might see the biggest impact with lower birth rates, but also that parents need to be persuaded more about the value of independent schools. So that's where sort of our storytelling comes in. Really, it's a really important, vital part through various different channels, to make sure that we're telling the story of why to come to our schools and moving just beyond the academic results, but it's more about nurturing. And all our schools do pride ourselves on instilling those key values in the children that for life beyond school, and making sure, I suppose, jobs that will exist when our children are looking for jobs they don't exist now. So it's making sure those core skills are embedded in our children as they grow through the schools. So that storytelling is vital.
No, we'll come back to that in a second. I'll have to pin George on that one. So, Samantha, obviously, slightly different place. Obviously, you are working predominantly with international students. I think up to 80% of the students that go to Regents are from overseas. Um, are you seeing that the mix is changing, or the nature of some of the students and where they're coming from evolving since the international restrictions on tighter visa rules?
Not really. I mean, we're very lucky. And as Lisa said, we're very fortunate. The other sector, I know, are struggling, but we haven't noticed the same trends here. I think we've just historically, we are known as an international institution. As you mentioned, 80% of our student body is from overseas. That's saying some of the markets, and we're seeing some kind of increases across certain kind of markets. But the competition is definitely getting fiercer, and we're definitely having to work harder and fight for that kind of market share. But I suppose from a domestic perspective, but there's still a great opportunity there, particularly for our psychotherapy students. And that's where our kind of persona of our student actually completely changes. For our psychotherapy, they're part-time courses, so it's obviously not a visa, it is not an opportunity there for those courses. And we actually see a shift of 88% as actually domestic students. So it's definitely a mix. Yeah, definitely a mix, but international is definitely still very strong for us. And in terms of like how adapting obviously our kind of storytelling and marketing, I think, as Lisa mentioned, it's so key that we really show what it is that we're actually selling. And as obviously Rachel mentioned, personal experience is something we do very well here. Our cohort are very small numbers, between kind of 20 to 30 in the classes. And that's something we can really offer, that personalized experience. And what we're doing is really spotlighting that within our marketing. So we're known for our unparalleled industry connections. I'll go on later, but yeah, we have the likes of Chanel and the Savoy, Laurent Perrier, and that's amazing. Our students really get to kind of meet that, and we're working actually a lot with George actually to kind of bring that to light in our storytelling, and that's actually seen some really strong conversions as a result of that coming into this cohort. And also we offer a really fantastic future-facing curriculum. Again, going back to Rachel's point, it's not just about the core subject, it's actually about how are they going to take this. They need multidisciplinary skills. How are they going to be adapting to entrepreneurial kind of spirits? How are they going to kind of work with industry? What other elements can they learn to kind of make them a well-rounded kind of students? So that's something we also offer. And everything we do is practical. It's not classroom teaching. It's very interactive. We constantly work with industry professionals to do live projects. So I think this is kind of why we're appealing to both the kind of international and domestic, but for an international, they know they're going to come here and potentially meet, people from all over the world. And actually, we've seen some great success stories where they've met and actually they then dominate those markets when they're setting up their businesses, from China to kind of India. And that's just a great place to be in. So yeah, I think all of that kind of why we're probably still not quite seeing the same trend, although it is challenging.
No, of course, at the other end of the scale, thank you very much, Samantha. Kirsty, much in the way of classroom teaching, or is there? I guess there probably is for some of your rising fours. But your sector obviously has enjoyed the benefit that government seem to be supporting you by actually making available, depending on people's income, the opportunity for them to be able to actually claim up to 30 hours a week worth of nursery care. Has that changed both the mix of parents that you've actually brought into your community, as well as the number?
I think certainly, our demand has gone up, but we still find ourselves where there's not full capacity because certain ages or certain children want to come on different days. I listened to what Rachel's saying about how parents want children to learn how to be independent, and how important their well-being is. I think fundamentally that starts in the early years. From 0 to 4 is such that my saying is children are like sponges, and I guess my role is getting parents to understand that actually by sending their children to early years education is fundamental to their long-term benefit through primary school, through secondary school, whether it be through the independent or the state sector, or going on to university. That these children, their personal, social, and emotional development is so key in those early years. And yes, the funding, it's sort of being straplined as sort of free childcare, but the messaging that we talk about internally and trying to now, externally a lot more with parents is talking about it being early years education, because it is education. They don't come to my team of 44, trained, qualified staff. They don't come to us for childcare, for babysitting. They come to learn those social skills. They come to learn communication and language. We'll help support physical development. In terms of inclusivity, there are role plays that we do. There are obviously understanding different cultures and different ethnicities. And so all of those things that taught in these children 2, 3, 4 years old will talk back and discuss that with you, which is amazing. But yeah, we need parents to understand that that's where early years education is at the moment, or the sector, or that's what we champion personally.
When you're through, thank you, Kirsty, has spoken about the importance of communications, both internal and external communications. And, things have changed in that respect. George, are you finding the sorts of briefs you're getting today are different to, say, necessarily the briefs you might have been given from educators 5 or 10 years ago?
Yeah, I'd say definitely, because if you think about what we're talking about here, there's kind of a unifying theme, which is that pupils, parents, students, they want value for money from what they're getting. Be that the fees they're spending, get them facilities or get them personalized teaching, or if they're going to university, that they're getting good opportunities afterwards and they're likely to walk straight into a job. So I think that the challenges we're seeing coming along a lot more are trying to demonstrate that value for money, and that can be through just literally showcasing facilities, or it can be about trying to demonstrate that, for example, a university doesn't just talk the talk, they walk the walk. They have the opportunities, they have the connections, they have all the things that you would need after when you leave. I mean, I think for me, like as a content creator, I suppose the difference in this generation is that they're so hyper connected and they have all the information they need at their fingertips, and they're very good at finding it. So it's trying to not they're quite cynical as well. So you sort of need to tell them stories that it's going to resonate with them, but which they're also going to believe, and it's going to help them make that decision to essentially buy and sort of take the next step. So yeah, I think that's a lot that's coming through at the moment.
And we talk about hyperconnectivity, and obviously all of them will be active users, at least at that age, of the various different social channels. Increasingly, I'm seeing a lot of educational establishments using short form content on YouTube, AI-driven platforms too, and also on TikTok. Is that changing the way you think about how you distribute your content, George? Are you now having conversations with your
Mhm.
clients about actually the use over a broader range of different channels?
Yeah, definitely. It's sort of been a trend for a long time, to be honest with you, of trying to design for the end platform rather than sort of just, it used to be with brands, for example, you'd make a big TV advert and then they just chop it up into, short form content, and that never really worked. But now I think you just have to be even more conscious of the end platforms that you're going to be delivering that content to, because obviously all the platforms have nuances in terms of um, the native way that the content is displayed there, whether that's TikTok or Snap or even something like Twitch. So you have to think in mind of that sort of it's more about, for me, it's more about the state of mind of the individual that's on that platform at the time. So if they're on TikTok, they're extremely short attention span, scrolling through a million things at once. If they're on YouTube, they might be actually looking for sort of answers to something. They'll be actually maybe indulging it a bit more. But even when you're still doing content for example, schools will often do things for TV and for cinema, because it's much more accessible than it once was. You've still got that audience there, but they're a little bit more engaged. And so content has to be different for there as well. So definitely. And I think that's something that's just going to continue, obviously, with AI coming along now, and um, people need to spend a lot less time on sort of delving deep on websites to get the answers. They can just get it immediately through AI. You sort of need to get to them where they are doing other things. So when they're indulging themselves with sort of scrolling Instagram or whatever, that's where you need to be. So yeah, I think that's definitely a trend, and it's only going to get more and more.
Joanne's raised a very Thank you for that. It raised a very important point, and it is the whole area of differentiation in what is a very crowded marketplace. If you look at some of the content, particularly look at both websites and look at brochureware, you will get very, very similar words. So it's a similar vocab. Let's be honest about it. Where it's nurturing innovation, world-class teaching, etc., etc. This one's really for Lisa, Sam, and Kirsty. I mean, when it comes to kind of tone of voice and trying to create brand differentiation, particularly actually for Mill Hill Educational Group, where you've got a group of different schools, all with ideally a slightly different personality. How do you manage that?
I think it's really challenging because, like the question's been asked with like pastoral care, everyone says they've got excellent pastoral care. I think that's where the content really comes into its own because it's really important that you're saying marketeers can say what they want to say, but it's when you've got the actual real life examples. So your social media content on a day-to-day basis, we can be talking about the amazing things that have happened in the classroom. So you're actually putting substance behind those statements. And in addition to that, we've done video content for sort of brand films for each of our different schools, not all of them, but each of them are very different in their approach. So we'll talk about, for example, one of our girls' schools is um, the importance of that girls' school approach. Whereas one of the other, when we did some research with the parents, with all the stakeholders behind within the schools, different messages were coming out of the different research we conducted. And for example, in keyboard prep, it was more about the community and being part of that special community. So we sort of lean on different value points of the and what's important for the different stakeholders. That said, I don't think we'll move away from shouting about innovation and world-class teaching and nurturing, because I still think that is important. But I think it's then having the content to back up those claims.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I completely agree with Lisa there. And I think it is kind of showcasing exactly what you're actually saying is what you're doing. And I think we've done that. And I think we are one of the first institutions, I'd like to say, that have had CEOs of Fortnum Mason, the vice president of Estée Lauder Group. They actually feature on our films, and that's just a small kind of percentage of the people that now feature in our films. But actually, these are real connections that the students are making. The students do know them, they can know their names, they are saying that they've met with them, they can call them at any point now they've graduated. So that's key in terms of our content. But then also within our kind of socials, before we had all these amazing speakers. So I've been at the institution for just over a year, and we weren't shouting about it, we're just telling our students. But for prospect students to know that the vice president of Chanel comes here and you can actually meet and chat to her, like, wow, why are we not telling this across our social channels? That's a great driver. So that also comes into the mix. And then in addition to that, where do our students go? So we set up an amazing initiative called the Luxury Lab Consultancy, whereby our students actually are presented a challenge by industry professionals. We've had Fortnum Mason, Lauren Perrier, and Estée Lauder companies, and they've actually come for a challenge. And actually, they've actually consulted to them at a very high standard. And since then, they've gone on to work for Dunhill. Someone's just started their first job at John Perignon. So actually seeing they're actually not only kind of what great opportunity that we're offering, but actually so going on to secure positions as well. So I think, completely goes back to Lisa, like you've got to kind of showcase, yes, we are doing, and of course the words are all very similar, but how are we actually showing that we are different and we are walking the walk that we say? So yeah, that's what we're doing.
Just to
So
add to
the
that, there's also content that we'll do showcasing our alumni. So we're really proud that in, say, one of our schools, Mill Hill, is that our pupils go on to do such a wide range of careers, and I think that's celebrating that, whether it's it's a professional cricketer or there's a whole range of barrister or some of the traditional or entrepreneurs. I think it's showcasing some of the breadth of that range so that we can tell the stories and parents can sort of relate to that my child might turn into any one of these, go down any one of those routes. Just, again, it comes back to the storytelling.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was going to say something about content as well. What we found, we've used a small film videography side of things, and what I love seeing is sometimes the children's laughter. So, I mean, when we put that out on social media, and you can see that the parents sort of, child pulling a fruit from the tree or out of the carrots out of the ground, and their sort of laughter, the nature of it and what they can relate to it. But also, we've recently done a lot of research with parents, and you talk about your alumni. For us, it would be about how our children are ready for school because we're preparing them for primary school. So then getting the feedback, actually, how did the children do when they started in reception? Because they've spent 4 years with us in what we say is nurturing and innovative and great. They're going to be fine. We're getting them ready for our next big world, the big wide world per se, but it's actually then feeding that content of the feedback from the primary schools that the Manor Farm nursery children, they thrive, when they start school, that independence is there. So sharing the full circle of feedback.
So I mean, what you're all saying, I think, is about brand authenticity. Is about actually, the proposition needs to evolve from the authenticity of the brand itself. It needs to be baked into what you are and what you do. And then the idea of actually then losing alumni or students or children to be able to actually talk the talk and bring that brand proposition alive. I mean, for those that haven't been to Kirsty's nursery, the beauty of that proposition is that everything takes place on a real farm. So the children are basically outside all day, literally all day, given the opportunities to basically, be in a really natural environment. And that, I guess, is a strong differentiator from some of the traditional ways that nurseries have probably operated in the past. Marcus has got a question relating to budgets. We've seen budgets across all sectors under pressure in the last 18 months, 2 years, as the economy has faltered. Are we seeing, when it comes to having conversations, your annual budget review, which I guess you're coming up for about now, the conversations you're having, are they basically budgets going up, or is there a trend for budgets to be going down?
I mean, I'm happy to take that. From our side, if there's an opportunity that we feel strongly about, we are always happy to try. And I think that's one of the benefits actually being here, that I suppose, somewhat how we teach our students that if we fail, okay, right, let's learn from that and let's go on from there, and not to be afraid of failure. So I'd say that, yeah, our budgets haven't been changed actually. If anything, if there's a new initiative, they're more open to obviously taking on ideas, particularly as the market's getting fiercer. We've got to try and be innovative in the way that we approach things. So yeah, that's how we are.
Yeah, same. So I think there's certain things we've cut down on sort of some of the print elements that we do. But yeah, I think we've got a really supportive CEO who really truly believes in marketing and the value of it. And I think, like Samantha said, we're fighting over each of our customers. So we need to be going out there and doing more as well.
Mm.
Note here from Rachel. Thank you, Rachel. Actually, I should have come back to you on this. Is what you were saying is that both Samantha and Lisa have mentioned from a recent project that parents and students also want to understand what sits behind the shiny, and the kind of proof points are particularly important. And also kind of talking to students and actually telling their stories and what it's like to study there, that becomes a reality and increasingly important. Okay, I want to move on, if I may, to some questions relating to the whole issue of kind of the group context for you, Lisa. We've spoken about the balance between group communications and school communications at a local level, and building your own identities there. Is there not a danger that over time in your acquisitions that you'll actually get to a point where you start to compete with yourself?
Um, So I feel quite strongly that each of the schools, especially when we merge, it's one of the first questions the schools have. Are we rebranding? Are we changing our name? But I feel strongly that each of the schools need to retain their own identity. There is one school that we are looking to rebrand, but that's for separate reasons versus us merging. And that's just to kind of modernize them as a brand. There are some times where we have got similar markets. We've got quite a few in Hertfordshire, but I think that the benefits outweigh those because we can share facilities. We can act as different feeder schools. I think that when you step into a school, it has to be right for your child, and each of them will give a different sense of offering. There might be different subjects, the different vibe and different feeling that parents get. So I think that the leaders do choose them wisely, so we're not going to be cannibalizing each other. If that sort of answers your question.
No, that makes sense. I guess it's always kind of opportunity versus actually, is marketing part of that process? So if a school gets itself into a financial difficulty and is looking to be acquired, is marketing part of the assessment process before you make an acquisition?
In some shape or form, not not at the sort of the very top level, but our CEO very much looks for like-minded values schools. He wouldn't merge with a school that didn't have the same values as us.
Okay, and of course, one of the things we have seen is a lot of independent schools are now opening up overseas, and sort of we've seen that with Wellington, Eton, I believe Harrow, and now Brighton College. Is that something that Mill Hill is considering, or has it done?
So we've got our first school in Thailand. I'm pretty sure it won't be our last, but I'm not privy to any of those conversations. But yeah, I would have thought there'd be definitely more. It's another revenue stream for the schools, which obviously in the current climate is really important for us.
Okay, and Kirsty, I guess your proposition can only be replicated if you've got that sort of farm environment. So would that be part of your future consideration if you were to open up another nursery?
Yeah, I think it's so much behind where we come from. Our ethos is about outdoor learning. Children, there's evidence that children, particularly boys, learn better when they're outdoors. All of us need fresh air. Staff, the team as well, the teaching staff it's so essential for them to be outdoors. So, I mean, where we currently are, we have animals, but it doesn't mean that we need to have another nursery with animals. You can still have outdoor learning. You can create woodland areas from very small, areas. But yeah, the outdoor learning is so essential to stick with our brand for our next stages. Yeah.
Thank you. We've got a general question here relating to ROI, and in terms of how, as marketers and as the chief executive, you measure ROI when it comes to marketing. Lisa said they're pulling back from doing more printed materials and now focusing on other activities. And I'm also fully aware that a lot of schools and universities do engage and employ agents who will introduce prospective parents to schools and universities. So I'd be interested to understand how that works, but equally, how do you measure ROI? Let's start with Sam or Lisa, I don't mind.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So for all the campaigns we do, we're actually understanding ROI across numerous platforms. We're very we try to be data centric here. And I think for us, for example, let's say video content as one element, it isn't just about measuring one platform because we don't know how that works. Then we looked at social, how that works for that, website, CRM, and recruitment, and all of them have different qualities, which is why it goes back to what Georgia mentioned, kind of being understanding each platform and obviously adjusting the content for those is so crucial to making sure you get a strong ROI. And I think that was one of the key things that came out of that research. In terms of sorry, was the other questions? ROI. So there's one more question. Agents. Yeah, there we go. Thank you. So agents are very crucial for us, and obviously they do bring in a good amount of revenue for us. What we're finding obviously is as the market's getting more competitive, of course, obviously commissions are changing, etc. And we have to still be competitive in terms of what we're offering. Also, relationships are really key. So that is something that we've always got great relationship with our agents, but school councils as well, building those relationships because actually that's a key opportunity for us. So yeah, we are doing a lot of work about looking at strategic markets that we know that has got the growth opportunities as we can see from the numbers, and then going out from there to kind of really kind of nurture that and kind of push that forward. Yeah.
So just to add to that, in terms of the ROI of the prospectus, obviously it's really hard to quantify the ROI of that specific channel. But what we are finding is that some parents still want the printed materials when they come to our open days. So a couple of things we've done is for those sort of more sort of eco conscious families, we have a QR code that's put on our programs that we give out or on some stands as they come in. So everything's completely digitalized what we give out. So it's their choice whether they go for take a printed or the digital version. And actually, from our post sort of event surveys, it's definitely back when I started some 8 years ago, it was definitely that print was more of the champion, but we're definitely seeing that shift. So I'd say it's about 60-40 with people still wanting printed materials. So we are still doing those. We are actually in the process of rolling out a HubSpot, which is a CRM system, and that will really help us track our marketing activities, seeing what is actually working. So I'm really excited by that because that will benefit all our schools and just really help the marketing understanding where we should be investing our money.
Okay, and where
And
do you
then
stand with agents? Do you work with agents?
Yes. So agents, we've got a dedicated international recruitment team who focus solely on the relationships with agents. So yeah, across the globe, they work with agents. and they are key for our obviously international boarding markets as opposed to our day markets.
And then acting as a feeder into various universities, do you have structured relationships or do you tend to work with all of
Yes,
them?
this will be our sort of our head of careers. We'll have those relationships with, and we'll be helping pupils choose their sort of head of careers, and also there's the head of sort of the UCAS side of things and feeding into universities. So they'll have those relationships with the different universities.
Okay, thank you. Kirsty, I guess you don't really have a feeder into you unless you're sort of basically hanging outside of hospitals.
Hospitals, health
Maternity
visitors,
wards.
midwives. I mean, actually, our current parents are always, I shouldn't say always, that, are often having another baby. The biggest thing is for them to want to, sign up their next one, after their 12-week scan, which is genuinely what happens, and that's how our spaces get filled. We're fortunate like that. But I was just thinking about the teaching side of things, the investment in teaching that Joanna, just the point that she brought up, because we have a very, very high, if you imagine in a 1-to-3 ratio with children under 2, we have a very high investment in the teaching staff. So a lot of our cost goes into teaching, training, and I'm with you on that. I've really worried about how much we invest in marketing in the past, but I've come to understand the longer journey of that, and actually then it's given me the capacity to then have, the ability to invest back into teaching. At no point did we lose any quality, but I have to say, I'm now a firm believer that it's every new person that looks on your website, every new person that comes and has a visit and has a look round and they have their experience. For us, they're with us for 4 years, and it is well worth that investment. And like Lisa said, we find that anything that they can take home is really, really important, because what we're seeing is other, maybe perhaps more so in our industry, but other nurseries are not providing that information about what they offer. It's quite simple. Some nurseries are just saying, this is what it costs, this is our availability, especially in a time now where spaces are hard to come by. But for me, it's more about that, is actually we do cost more than other local nurseries, and so for them to go away with something that looks really professional, and actually to think, okay, I could actually spend that a little bit more, 5-10% more than I might have done at another nursery. However, what I'm going to get back is this early years education in a quality space with quality teaching staff. And it seems to have worked so far.
Can we stick with you for a second and we'll move around the table, as it were? The whole area of sustainability and how it influences parents, particularly as we kind of see the next generation becoming parents, Gen Zs, millennials, bringing kids into the education system. How is that affecting what you deliver in terms of your products and what you think about, and B, your considerations when it comes to marketing? So we'll start with Kirsty, and then we can then move to Sam.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, it's in terms of sustainability, we've got to look at what we're using across the board. And there's there's a high turnover of resources for us in the nature of what we do. So we need to be careful what we use. People are now, they're concerned about things are plastic or wood, or what nappies you're using and things. We have to make sure that parents, where possible, are involved in that decision making, but equally they understand that there may be an extra cost that comes with that. So we just try and make it, it's a conversation we have early days about what the wants and desires are of the parents. And then, our plan, we're still working on it, is just to sort of educate them as to what we do use and why we do use things, and actually, being efficient as possible, in order to still provide something that's quality, but also financially viable for them, for us to charge.
Thank you. Sam.
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing, as someone's highlighted, so it's great that you've seen that we have just acquired our B Corp certification. For us, this, I suppose, it's really embedded in what we do. We feel that we want to kind of lead by purpose, and if we're kind of setting those kind of expectations for our students to kind of bring purpose and passion to the future, we should lead by example. So I think that kind of goes back into our kind of core values. But we are adjusting some of the things that we're doing. So, for example, Spectres, as you mentioned, Lisa, we're going on to digital. We've been banging that drum for quite some time actually as a marketing department. Like, we don't need to be spending all this time on printing. Yes, certain markets do still want the brochure, and we obviously have to respect, obviously that's kind of how we're going to obviously incentivize the parents to kind of choose regions. But actually where we can, we are very conscious of actually going kind of digital. I think though for me, sustainability is something that it's just expected. If you're a luxury brand, it's expected that you will do what's right for the environment. And I think when people do buy into luxury, that is what you expect. So yeah, I think it's just, yeah, for me, I don't think it changes the decision, because really they would expect that we're doing those things already. But obviously highlighting that we have got the accreditation to actually back up what we're saying we're doing, of course, goes a very long way.
Thank you. Lisa, do you want to jump in on this one?
I don't really have much more to add, only that there's a lot of schools that do give out a lot of plastic merch, which we sort of we scale back on. We do give a notebook out, but something that's practical that people can use, or a water, a sort of metal water bottle. But we don't give out all of the sort of gimmicky plastic. We have changed our railing banners, which is good for sort of the footfall when we're promoting our open mornings, which is less around pushing the date. I'm not yet convinced that it's the right approach, but from an eco perspective, it absolutely is. So you don't have to reprint your banners every time, but obviously you're not then pushing one date. So the jury's out on those sort of minor things, but we'll see over time.
Yeah, it's got to communicate, isn't it?
Yeah, that's
Classic.
the thing. Our schools have got sort of eco school green flags, which parents seem to like and enjoy.
Stephen, I was going to jump in and say that when we first started working with schools, it was quite common to send out video prospectuses, which were these horrible one-use video screens that would go out in a little pack, and it would all be nicely branded, and you open it up and a film would play in there, and then theoretically you could use that little screen for other things. But that was commonly being used. You can't imagine anyone ever sending anything like that out again. And it's slowly shifted from that sort of thing through to so many of the schools that we work with now have personalized digital prospectuses that it's that kind of customized journey for the parents, that they get a personalized approach. But of course, many do still want to have the physical brochure. They need to give that to the grandparents, for example, to have a look at, to decide, because they might be helping with the fees. But I definitely think it's been a big shift, and that's something that we see a lot in the schools that we're working with. Sure.
Yes. Certainly wish my parents had helped with the school fees, but there you go. We can't all be so lucky on that one. But one of the final thoughts, if I may, is really relating to where things are likely to go in the next 3 to 5 years, and what further disruption we see in the industry, whether it's going to be from a global perspective or government regulation, AI, which we haven't really spoken about today, and how that's impacting on education. Certainly more competition from around the world. So if I may, let's sort of start. Let's start with Rachel. In terms of what your evidence suggests, where are you seeing the big shifts that are likely to come from? Is it more to do with government pressure or AI, or is it going to be a combination of things?
From what we're saying, I think it's going to be a combination of things. I think nobody knows what's around the corner. Nobody knows what new government policy or what changes they're going to bring in. So I think they're just trying to stay ahead. But I think everybody's recognizing the fact that it's more of a business transaction than it ever has been before. More choice, more, and as kind of somebody said in the chat, kind of everybody's kind of trying to find a point of difference. And I think it is a case of how you can find a point of difference, but still being authentic at the same time. I think people are very much seeing through the mass use of AI. And whilst obviously it is becoming important, I think they recognize that actually it is that authenticity. It is what is the real story behind, those shiny doors, that's, glossy brochures. And I think that's what we're starting to very much come through.
It's just interesting, isn't it? The world of work changed immeasurably due to COVID, and people's expectations of when they come to the office evolve very rapidly. We saw schools rapidly migrate to homeschooling and the ability to be able to actually communicate on platforms like this. Work regime hasn't really gone back to where it was before, yet people are still expected to go to school on a daily basis. And I just wonder, again, with pressures and the sheer cost, do we think there's going to be a different sort of school in the future where there's no expectation that people come on a daily basis, where actually education is delivered by a mix of different channels and mediums? Anyone?
That's a really tough question. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I was
I
gonna say
don't
that's
go for it. Sorry to see you there.
that's sorry. That's a really tough question because you just don't know. But a lot of our schools now use one-to-one devices, the senior schools. We are smartphone free in most of our schools. So we don't encourage the sort of digital devices in the day beyond obviously the laptop. Beyond AI, though, I think the other point to note is that a lot of families are moving abroad, so that will change the model of the schools, and maybe more schools will open abroad. But yeah, I don't know in terms of whether schools will move more remotely. Obviously, the universities are doing that. So,
I
Samantha,
think
do
it's
you want
good.
to?
I mean, for
Please.
us, oh, sorry. Do you want to carry on, Stephen? Apologies.
No, no, please. No, please jump
I
in.
was just going to say for us, I can't see it. We are exploring certain courses, such as the psychotherapy, that they potentially could go online just to give more options. But I think really at our core, personalization is who we are, having that one-to-one, actually getting to know the students by name, by understanding how they like to be taught, where their future ambitions are. That is why why the students and parents come to us because of that. So I can't see that changing for me. It may do for other universities, but I think what we offer is so unique. That's why they're coming to us for that personalization and that kind of one-to-one. So yeah, I wouldn't see that for us.
And Kirsty, I guess you could already argue that actually you already have that flexibility in your model. So actually parents can actually engage for as many days or hours as they want.
As in coming to visit, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, no, actually coming to bringing their children to the nursery. There's no
yes, yeah.
commitment.
No, there's no commitment to stay. I mean, we're quite happy and quite open to parents obviously coming along, not only their visit, but sometimes, they come and pick up their children from the dentist, this, that, and the other. So I think there's an open door policy. They're welcome, and it means that they feel there's nothing to hide in the nicest possible way. And sadly, occasional cases that there are worrying scenarios where people think, that there are things to worry about. But no, I mean, we welcome parents coming in. I think, we have a parent partnership group we meet up with, and we make sure that they're part of the next stages. Every time I do a communication, I run it past a small group, advisory group, and it just helps, involving them in each of those stages every time.
Brilliant. Well, listen, I would like to thank you all for your participation today. It's been a very good conversation. Covered a lot of different topics in a very brief amount of time. I think we could probably carry on talking for hours. There's lots we didn't get to, so I do appreciate your time. I'd like to thank all of you who've tuned in today, and particularly, obviously, agencies and other educational brands. It's been great to see so many of you here. We will share the content from today. The little video will be available afterwards, and you'll be able to actually share it with colleagues. And if you have any questions of any of the speakers today, please do drop me a line. And if you need any resources to help differentiate your particular educational establishment and tell your story, then equally do let us know. But for now, thank you very much. It's now rapidly approaching midday, and I suspect you've got other meetings to go and the school bell's ringing. So thank you once again, and I hope to see you on the next call. Thank you. Bye-bye.